I saw the original Planet of the Apes when I was a kid, with Charlton Heston, and I thought it was kind of neat. It was like a neat twist, to the story. I'm sure most of you know the twist by now. I'm not gonna spoil it just in case you're like one of the 1% who hasn't seen the original Planet of the Apes, or hasn't looked at the cover art for any of like the home video or DVDs or Blu-rays or anything like that, which they blatantly put the end of the movie right on the front. Um, but I thought it was a cool idea. It made sense that Rod Serling was a part of that because it felt like some sort of Twilight Zone episode, and that was kind of it for me. I never got around to watching the sequels. I don't even know how many there are from that original era. When Rise of the Planet of the Apes was announced, I was just like, whatever. And then I eventually ended up renting it, and I was really pleasantly surprised. It was a little bit cheesy at times, but I thought Andy Serkis gave a great performance as Caesar, and I thought it had a hell of a third act as far as action goes. It's just a really solid, like, popcorn movie. It's exactly what I think an Apes movie should be. Not long after that, Matt Reeves took over as director and gave us Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. And to be honest with you, I didn't go to theaters to see it, despite really liking Rise. I remember renting it and watching it, and I was a little bored by it, to be frank. I remember not liking or caring about any of the human characters. I thought it was kind of a bummer that no one was carried over from the first movie. More than that, yeah, it was kind of a very bleak movie, and it just didn't really, hit me, I guess. I appreciated the story that was being told between Caesar and his buddy Koba, and Koba wanted to start a war. Caesar wanted to avoid that, and of course we know how that went. So I thought it was a really interesting dynamic, conceptually, that the enemy, quote unquote, of the movie would be another ape, not just the humans. However, that came and went. I don't remember much from that film, to be honest. However, when War for the Planet of the Apes, see, I got to get my title straight. War for the Planet of the Apes was announced. I was definitely curious, and before it hit theaters, there was a lot of great buzz about the film. Like, a lot of people saw it early and were like 10 out of 10, this and that. It's amazing, the best ending to a trilogy ever made. Stuff like that. I mean, which is a fair point because, as we know, like most third movies in a trilogy are really bad. Look at Dennis Quaid's Jaws 3. To be honest, I kind of went into this with no expectations, really. I knew there was a lot of buzz about it, but then again, a lot of people loved Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and I couldn't be more lukewarm about it. However, as soon as this film started, I knew that it was a little bit different. It opens with like a battle scene, which is pretty cool, and it quickly establishes within the first 10 minutes of the film what exactly is going on. We find out that there is a war going on, led by a colonel who's played by Woody Harrelson, but we'll get to him in a second. And that we even find out that some of Koba's followers have joined up with the colonel, have turned against their apes, and they're referred to as donkeys, as in Donkey Kong. It's not long before we find out Caesar's still trying to like end this war and get out of it peacefully. But the colonel is relentless, and he attacks basically the home base of the apes. And so Caesar is left in a tough spot because he has a family to look out for, and not only that, he has this entire tribe of apes that are looking to him to make all these huge decisions. And Caesar decides that he's basically going to send these apes to safety, and he alone is going to go track down this colonel and see what he can do about it. And at this moment, some of his friends come along. Maurice, who's been in the previous flicks, and there's two other apes, and I surprisingly remember their names, which is Luca and Rocket. So the four of them go off on this kind of wartime adventure, and that's the basis for the first half of this film. It's this adventure to track down this army, to track down this colonel, and along the way, they run across two integral characters. One is a little girl who doesn't speak any English, and Caesar wants to leave the girl be, and Maurice is like, we have to take the girl with us. You know, she's gonna die. So they do, and that creates an interesting dynamic. Because this film doesn't focus too much on the human characters, and that's probably for the best, considering how boring and two-dimensional the human characters have been in the past couple of movies. Not all of them, but like the bulk of them. The second character is another ape that speaks, known as Bad Ape, and he's played by Steve Zahn, who I'm a big fan of, and he does a phenomenal job here. He really injects the film with something a little different as far as the apes go, because to be honest, sometimes it's hard to separate the apes from each other a little bit, you know, aside from their designs, what have you. But Bad Ape really stands out and gives the film a good amount of levity, much needed levity. There's not a lot of humor in this film. It is a pretty bleak film, but I think Bad Ape is going to be a fan favorite if you like the Ape series. And he's really funny and really off kilter, and I think he suits the film well. That leads us into the second half of the film. The apes do track down the Colonel and his base, and they find out that he's been imprisoning other apes. And so the second half of the movie is a prison escape movie. And I know some people I've talked to were a little upset at the fact that it's not an all-out war movie. I mean, it takes place during a war, but there's not a lot of battle sequences, you know. And the second half of the movie really kind of slows things down in terms of movement, you know, as far as they're not traveling everywhere. It's all taking place in one location. I personally really enjoyed that aspect of the film. We get to know the Colonel a little bit more, and back to Woody Harrelson. He does a really good job as the Colonel. He's arguably the only other human character aside from the little girl that we actually learn anything about, and we get a little bit of his backstory. And arguably, it may or may not be compelling to you, but what's important is that it makes sense for the character and why he's doing what he's doing. You know, you may not agree with it, but you're like, okay, I get it. You know, he's not the be-all, end-all of villains or anything like that, but he works for the film. I'll say this. The movie sets up a lot of little kind of plot threads, and, you know, rarely does it take the easy way out with those. And I really appreciated that. It doesn't take the easy way out, but it does deliver something satisfying. You know, if you latch onto a certain character or a certain plot line, I think those really pay off in the end. And it's worth noting that lately I've been pretty disappointed with Michael Giacchino, the composer, as far as his scores have been concerned. I know I reviewed Spider-Man: Homecoming last week, and I didn't mention the score because it's really not worth mentioning. You know, I dare you to ask anyone who's seen Spider-Man: Homecoming to hum or whistle the new Spider-Man theme for you. Not going to happen. He delivers a solid score here. I think there's a few integral moments that he doesn't quite get it. I mean, to be honest, most of the time I think he's kind of like the poor man's John Williams. But every now and again he stumbles upon a really great theme or a solid score, and I think this is definitely one of the better scores. And it definitely has that sound that the original kind of Planet of the Apes score had too, which helps. So it's kind of like a blending of the two styles, if you will. And that's basically as much as I'm going to say about the story. I don't want to get into any spoilers, so I'll leave it vague as far as, you know, what happens to the characters at the end of the film. But again, to go back what I was saying about those plot lines where it doesn't take the easy way out, but it's satisfying. I mean, that's kind of the movie as a whole. I know a lot of people have taken to this film and the other films a lot stronger than I have. So maybe it's just something on me and kind of my lukewarm feelings about the series as a whole. So I didn't love the movie. I liked it a lot. I think it was a really good popcorn flick. And sometimes it was compelling, but I was never, you know, too emotionally invested in it. Even though emotions run pretty high, you know, considering what's at stake in these films. Now maybe it's because I'm watching a bunch of CG apes, and that's kind of like, all right, you know, kind of thing. Or maybe it's just, you know, I guess you could say disinterest in the series as a whole. Because again, I've spoken to a lot of people who absolutely love the film. And they're like, you only liked it, you're crazy. But no, I think it is a really solid film, and I think it caps off this trilogy really well. Of course, they can make more movies, but there's definitely a sense of finality come the end of the film. To everyone's credit, I mean, the fact that you're watching some of these really intense emotional scenes with just CG apes, who are motion captured by humans, um, and you're caught up in the moment, and they deliver it with such conviction, and it kind of hit me. I was sitting in an audience of people, and we're all looking at a bunch of fucking CG apes, But the fact that director Matt Reeves and everyone else involved, pulled it off so well is, I guess, a testament to not only this film but the story and the series as a whole. So before you think I'm just spouting off negative things, no, I like the movie a lot, actually. And I think it's definitely one of the better movies to hit this summer. And it's one of the few movies that not only does it tug at some of your heartstrings and get you thinking, but it also delivers that action quota too. So, the easiest thing is I think it's a good movie. I think if you're a big fan of the Ape series, you're really going to love this one. If you're more of a mild fan, I think you'll enjoy it. And really, what more could you ask for? Really, it's a summer movie. It's, there you go. It hits the spot like buttery popcorn and a soda and some Skittles.